Hi, my name is Stephanie Sharo, and I'm a senior physics and sustainability student at Stockton University, and I will be presenting you my research on college students' perspectives on climate change. Stockton University prides itself on being the Green University of New Jersey. Therefore, I really wanted to test how important green ideologies were to students at the school. I work closely with a few community partners, including Citizens Climate Lobby. When I went to one of their meetings 2 years ago, I was the only college age student, and the entire crowd was made up of people our grandparents' age, and I wanted to investigate why that was happening. Why are college students not participating in climate activism? I worked with the Bonner Foundation and COSI to create a research project to better understand why there is such a divided generational action for a very intergenerational problem. Starting with understanding a more global perspective, there is a clear generational gap in the understanding and prioritization of climate change, but there is little research in this field as a whole. By contributing research to the public's understanding of climate change, we can better improve policy and education. However, this clear gap between the older generation is a barrier. The goal of this research is to understand Stockton University's students' perspective on the older generation's involvement in climate action, as well as their students' perception of climate change. I worked with my advisor, Dr. Anthony Disson, to create a survey that we would send out to only Stockton University students. This survey included qualitative and quantitative data comprised of 15 questions, as well as 5 introductory questions. These questions included the consent form, their gender, year at Stockton, and major. Viewers are encouraged to pause the video to read through the questionnaire if they are interested. Starting with my methodology, the survey was sent out for a total of 4 weeks in the month of November in 2019. It was sent out to the department heads so they can send it out to their students. The department heads included the Honors College, Office of Service Learning, and General Studies. It was also sent out to Dr. Disson's students who were a part of health science. This was done in order to get various backgrounds, so the data was not swayed towards one major specifically. A total of 103 surveys were collected. However, only roughly 50% of the respondents answered the long response questions. Looking at the breakdown of the survey results, there was a 9 to 2 female to male ratio. This information is more helpful when looking at the specific answers of the questions. The gender identity is relevant when looking at the perspective because it is also a factor at risk assessment for people, according to Valerie Vesson. There were also a majority of health, science, or related majors, and an age range going from 17 to 54. However, the majority of students surveyed were between 17 and 25, which was expected. Moving on to the results. Firstly, there were a total of 5 students that majored in sustainability or environmental science. Therefore, the survey does successfully give insight on how other majors view the issue of climate change. The majority of participants do see climate change as a pertinent issue, with only 2 people rating it at a 1. One of these people were over the age of 30. The second question showed that 65% of participants agreed a lot that climate change is a high risk danger. This data was encouraging to see. Roughly 5% of respondents across all questions selected answers that suggested that climate change was not a priority or there was a lack of understanding of what climate change was. However, when looking at questions asking the students feel if citizens have taken enough action against climate change, 67% believe no. Also, a quarter of participants nearly never talk about climate change both inside and outside the classroom. By creating more discussion in classes, perhaps we can change the perspective of climate change so more action can be taken. Over half of the participants agreed to increase their personal efforts against climate change. The open-ended response questions related to this showed that a majority of students made conscious efforts to reduce their waste and consumption by changing personal behaviors. This included recycling, composting, reusing, thrift shopping, growing and buying food locally, as well as not littering. However, almost no one responded with getting involved in organizations or politics to make direct changes. One student responded that they were going to school for environmental education so they can further educate the future generations. However, this was an outlier. Secondly, the survey does show that younger generations want to be involved with older generations on this issue, but feel that the younger and older generations do not interact enough to do so. There is a clear sense of frustration towards the older generation and the perceived inaction. There were many quotes from the survey, such as, "Tell them to take us more seriously, and I think older people are set in their ways." Looking at multiple choice questions, only 10% of respondents believe that the older generation is involved with climate change more than moderately. However, the next question, how much do you believe the younger generations interact with the older generations, was only about 50% thought that it was a great deal or moderately. Therefore, one can think that perhaps the younger generation does not feel heard or respected in the conversations about climate change. This may be due to the professor and student interaction, and this may influence the answers for the survey. A third point is that there is a clear theme of frustration from Stockton students with their university and the lack of active commitment for being the Green School of New Jersey. There was a lot of students that roughly knew what Stockton did and how the campus works and how it's trying to be more green. However, there was a lack of true knowledge. For example, some students suggested a climate action team on campus. However, there are numerous climate student groups on campus, including SAVE, the Environmental Studies Club, and a few local climate organization chapters, such as the one that I work with. There are also teams of professors that work on numerous green projects, but these efforts are not talked about a lot. Perhaps the best thing Stockton could do is create outreach events to show their students their efforts, as well as hold meetings to get more students involved on climate change action on campus. It was also encouraged that Stockton University host educational outreach events to increase participation and work with local community members. Based on the results, the best way for climate organizations to get more interactions between generations is to create specific events and start by finding mutual interests. These meetings and outreach events were the most recommended by respondents. Some suggested starting the conversation with family members, others suggested having conversations with community members, but overall, events were preferred. Perhaps holding events on college campus while inviting other community members would be the most effective at bridging the gap between generations. The most interesting point that I saw was the last open-ended question, do you think the Earth's temperature has increased? These responses varied widely. About 5% denied the temperature increase. Another 5% stated that it was a scientific fact that the temperature increased. 7% gave other scientific examples, such as ocean temperatures increasing, decreased ice caps, and flooded shorelines. However, the rest of the respondents gave a personal perspective on how they see climate change. Most were weather observations, such as increased hurricanes, changes in the seasons compared to their childhood, warm winter days, as well as other weather activity. This can give insight on how organizations can go about creating interest in climate change and how to make it more personal so more people get involved. Finally, looking forward, this research can easily be expanded for future projects. One idea is to send the same survey to the same department heads again and see if the answers have changed since the political climate has changed. By sending the same survey out again, we can also see if the newer students, such as freshmen and sophomores, are more likely to be involved in climate activism. Another idea is that we could send out these surveys to community members, such as the local high school and elementary schools. This data would give a better description of how different generations perceive climate change rather than just college students. A final idea is to create a new survey specifically designed to better understand how to get more college students involved in climate outreach events. Now that we have the background information on how students perceive climate change as an issue, we can send another survey gauging what students are specifically interested in, event ideas, what is more attractive about certain events, and what outreach events to hold. One question I would encourage to be included in the next step is something along the lines of asking students if their parents believe in climate change. Thank you all for listening to my presentation about the perception of college students on climate change. I hope it was informative and interesting to you. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to my email, sharos1@go.stockton.edu. Thank you again. Be safe and healthy.